I have a guest on Tips from the Top Floor today. Don Komarechka is back to talk about his latest book, and in the process, I'm sure you'll learn a thing or two about some of the craziest macro photography that I've ever seen. This is Tips from the Top Floor 871 for July 11th, 2019.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, alright, from the top floor.
Hey, hello and welcome, it's Chris Marquardt, you're listening to Tips from the Top Floor, and here we are. I've had a bit of time to relax, but, honestly, I'm still all hyper because of the Chinese translation of the wide-angle book. It just blows my mind that something that I wrote is now translated into 2 other languages. That's just wild. Anyway, not much of housekeeping today. Let's get right into it. Today I have a guest on the show who has been here before. It's Don Komarechka from Canada. I had him here before, and I was also on his podcast on Photo Geek Weekly before. Don is, he's just a great source of interesting photo experiments. He loves to tinker. But not just that. I know people who tinker, but they never have any results from it. But he has the results to share and to show. And what's even more important, he loves to share what he does. He's done he has his podcast. He has a lot of stuff on YouTube and so on. But he's just about to bundle a lot of that together into a product. And I think from all I've heard and from knowing Don, this is going to be one of the biggest treasure troves for those of you who want to learn more about macro photography, and in form of a book, that is. And the Kickstarter campaign for that book is almost over, but I thought before it's finished, I will give you all the chance to learn a bit more about what's going to be in this book, and I guess there's a good chance we'll also learn something about macro photography in the process. So the other day I talked to Don, and here we go. Let me roll the tape. So welcome back, Don. How are you?
I am wonderful, Chris. Thanks for having me back on your show. I know you've been traveling a lot, so it's been good to nail down a time together.
And you're no stranger here on the show. You've been here several times before. Just as a reminder, we talked about your snowflakes photography. We talked about your ice pictures, your frozen bubbles, your ultraviolet photography. So the crazy professor is back, so to speak.
The mad scientist, as it were, which I take as a compliment.
That's what I meant it as. I have you here on the show because you have another project going on right now, which is exciting, and it's going in a very exciting direction right now. You have a Kickstarter for a new book out, and before we dive into that, just a reminder to everyone, or not a reminder, an announcement to everyone that this is very short notice because it's almost over. When this show comes out, it's just a few more days until the Kickstarter is over, so I hope this will still give you a bit of a boost. But what is the book about?
So macro photography I've always kind of referred to as the universe at my feet, because there's just so much to explore, even in your own backyard. I know, Chris, you and I like to travel to some exotic locations on occasion and sort of put ourselves out of our element. But you can get exactly that same kind of rush just by getting close to bugs and flowers and exploring snowflakes in the wintertime with unending detail. And it just always seems like the closer you get, the more there is to explore. And so I did a book previously we've talked about years ago when I was pushing that out, called Sky Crystals, and it was just on snowflakes. And that was crowdfunded as well. Huge success, and I sold out. I'm completely sold through the production run now. So I figured it was high time to put a book together on macro photography in general. The simple basic stuff, if you're just getting into it, how you handle a lens, how you deal with focus and lighting and that sort of thing, all the way through to master classes in the obscure, in everything from ultraviolet to high voltage and 3D photography, just the weird stuff.
Macro 3D.
Oh, it's so much fun. If you've never tried, then there will be.
How do you get two lenses so close together?
So there's a couple of ways you can do it. There was a company out of the Netherlands, De Wigis. They made, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but they made a series of macro lenses for full frame and crop sensor SLRs, where they would have two lenses inside the same barrel.
No way.
And they would have a septum, a divider that would go as far back as it possibly could without hitting the mirror. It was designed before mirrorless. And so you would have half of your sensor for your left eye, half of your sensor for your right eye.
That is interesting.
And they made them in different magnifications. They're hard to get now, but you can simply, if you're a macro photographer, you might own a focusing rail. And it's a very common tool that will shift the camera forward and backward ever so slightly to make your focus a little bit, tack sharp on the eye of an insect or on the stamens of a flower or something. However, if you use that focusing rail sideways, you can then gently move the camera in a left to right motion, where so long as you have a static subject, you can take one image, then move the camera 5 centimeters to the right and take another image, or even further, depending on how much of a parallax you're looking for. And I've done some macro that way as well, and it works wonders.
That is cool. It reminds me of a guy who I met on a workshop, who showed me 3D photos that his father had taken from the World Trade Center while it was being built.
Wow.
In New York. So what he did is he put a hard hat on and just snuck on the construction site. And then he went and took independent photos on different ends of the building. Because with this big of a scale, he wanted the eye distance to be really far.
And it would feel like you're a giant looking down at the city.
Exactly. And he brought these printed out 3D things that you put in a little viewer. And it made you feel like you are King Kong. It was amazing. So with macro, you have to get them really close together, right?
Yeah, and so I've got a number of different dedicated lenses for it, but so long as your subject is within the stereo window, which means that you're going to have some shift from the left and the right, but so long as part of your subject isn't cut off on one eye, which would create a visual artifact when you're viewing it. So you can shift as much as you can get without having to cut off your subject on one side or the other.
Sorry for the interruption. We'll continue this discussion right after this. Let me say a quick little thank you to this week's sponsor, HoneyBook. You know, if you run your own business, you're used to doing it all. But if you're struggling to get through your to-do list, HoneyBook can help. HoneyBook is an online business management tool that organizes your client communications, your bookings, your contracts, and invoices all in one place. HoneyBook makes it simple to run your business better. Professional templates, e-signatures, and built-in automation keep everything on track. And HoneyBook can even consolidate services you already use, like QuickBooks, Google Suite, Excel, MailChimp, and Gmail. It's the #1 choice for client and business management for freelancers and business owners. Save time and do more of what you love with HoneyBook. Right now, HoneyBook is offering you, the listeners of Tips from the Top Floor, 50% off your first year with promo code TOPFLOOR. Yeah, that's 50%. Payment is flexible and this promotion applies whether you pay monthly or annually. Go to honeybook.com and use promo code TOPFLOOR for 50% off your first year. That's honeybook.com, promo code TOPFLOOR. And on with the discussion.
But I mean, that's just one small part of the book. If I'm writing, this book's going to be 352 pages, I have the ability to go down every rabbit hole, and self-publishing allows me to do that.
It's also dangerous. So when you did the Sky Crystals about snowflake macro photography, that was very specialized. Now you opened it up to, pretty much anything that goes under that umbrella of macro photography.
I have some really interesting things here in studio that I'll be shooting for the book, including micrometeorites that a colleague of mine has sent me, and I am looking at all of these bits and pieces that I'm putting together into this project, and I think this is going to be a wonderful tome of knowledge for any macro photographer out there, but also. If you don't have access to things like micrometeorites, you can still learn all of the techniques required. And
you
just
could use grains of sand, right?
Grains of sand, or grains of pollen, for that matter.
Very cool. So just looking at the trailer, there's like a lot of stuff with water droplets. There's plants in there. There's insects.
Have you ever done water droplet refraction photography, Chris?
Well, I've done it on a bigger scale with the usual glass balls, but doing this on a macro level, no, I haven't tried that yet.
It's a lot of fun because you can place those droplets very specifically using a small plastic pipette or a hypodermic needle, and you can create these mini sculptures.
So you're doing set building on a very tiny scale.
Yeah, you become a sculptor before a photographer. You have to build something interesting to photograph, and then you have to get the camera involved afterwards. And
now, one thing you see often there is like the background being some landscape or a building or a flower or something that then is out of focus in the background, but it's in focus in the little water droplets. Just wondering, on your photos, are those real flowers? Are those printouts of flowers?
They are all real flowers. I mean, I could have faked it with prints, but I found it easier to use just the real ones.
If you have a fresh, good-looking one, yes. But if it takes a while to set all this up, you might have a wilting flower there.
Well, you pick flowers typically from the florist, and if they wilt within a few minutes, then you definitely did not get fresh flowers.
You need a different florist.
Yeah, but Gerbera daisies or any radially symmetrical flower works best for this because they'll fill in the droplet very, very nicely. And you just put it at a couple of inches to maybe a little bit further away if it's a large flower like a sunflower. And it gives you that nice, soft, out-of-focus background that comes tack sharp into those droplets, like little crystal balls. Yeah. And I actually have some crystal balls here. There's one sitting on my desk that I'm looking at as we chat. That's orders of magnitude larger. But you can easily substitute in. They call them water beads, which you may have seen in flower arrangements where they put in these little beads. They're tiny little pebbles,
glass
almost
beads. Yeah.
And then they grow as they absorb the water, and then they'll end up having the same refractive index as the water itself.
Oh, they're not made from glass. They're
not made from glass.
Some gel kind of thing.
Some kind of gel thing. And so if you don't want to get into the really small droplets, you can make your own that are 4 or 5 times larger than a regular water droplet could be. And so there's tons of little fun tricks around this stuff.
That is wild. So lots of different topics you cover there. What are kind of some of the, let's say, some of the interesting technical issues that you had to solve to get into these things?
Well, as soon as you start getting closer and closer to your subject, anybody in the macro photography world that's even dipped their toe in the water would realize that your depth of field becomes much shallower. The closer
pretty much
you are,
disappears.
Pretty much. A fraction of a millimeter once you get like right on top of a subject at some extreme magnifications. And there's no real way around that because, at least in camera, you can't set your aperture to, say, f96 and try to compensate for that shallow depth by making a smaller aperture using standard logic. That would, increase your depth, and you'd kind of go back and forth on that. But diffraction comes into play, where if we put our science hat on for a minute, which I love to do with photography, if we could imagine, Chris, in high school or in college, did you ever play with a ripple tank?
Nope, never. What is it?
A ripple tank is just this small little box of water. It's just flat, not very thick. And you make waves and see how those waves interact with objects within the tank. And my point is, if you have a wave of water that is moving forward and there's a small opening, the water that passes through that opening is curved on the other side.
True.
And this is diffraction. And the same thing happens when light passes through our lens. Regardless of how big your aperture is, this always happens to some degree. If you have a very wide aperture, it's going to be almost unnoticeable. But the smaller your aperture, the further light will bend off course from the pixel or the photosite on the sensor that it should be hitting. And if it passes across a certain threshold, it'll really start coloring outside the lines. And light that should be hitting 1 pixel is maybe hitting a grid of 9 pixels. And so your resolution goes down very, very quickly as soon as you start to use apertures that are too small.
So what do you do about that?
What do? You suffer through the very shallow depth of field in a single shot. Yes. And instead, you take multiple photographs at ever so slightly different focus points, such that there's a little bit of overlap between them, and they can be combined together in a process called focus stacking. And I've written tutorials on this before, and I've even done some videos on YouTube where you can watch me, putting these images together. But even as technology improves, there's newer ways to approach this. I'm shooting with the Lumix S1R right now, which has a high resolution mode of 187 megapixels, I think, which is ridiculous. I'd never need that for most of my everyday work. In fact, my cameras before this were 20 megapixel cameras, and that was fine. But what if, in this scenario, you've got a static subject, it's not like there's an ant or something moving around, and the camera can be on a tripod. What if you are intentionally farther away from your subject so that you know that your subject will be about 20 of those 187 megapixels within the frame, and you crop into that afterwards? Well, by the virtue of you being farther away, you've inherently given yourself a much greater depth of field without hitting any limits of diffraction.
Okay, one last interruption before we get to the rest of this interesting discussion. This episode is also supported by Nations Photo Lab. This spring, refresh your wall decor and get 15% off with Nations Photo Lab. Start with classic photo prints made by photographers for photographers, available in more than 60 sizes. So you can print as small as 3.5 by 5 or as large as 30 by 45. If you have photos that are more akin to museum quality artwork, print on canvas to create a scene of decor that belongs in the Louvre. To ensure your images look as vibrant as can be, try their best-selling metal prints, or if you have more of a down-to-earth vibe, put your images on wood print wraps, printed on real wood for a rustic, unique look. Don't limit your wall decor dreams. Create a gallery wall the way you imagine by mixing and matching different wall art mediums. Ordering online is easy, so you can turn your Instagrams into instant memories that will last for years to come. Make every moment matter. Try Nations Photo Lab today and head to nationsphotolab.com. Use code TOP15, that's TOP15 for 15% off your order. That's nationsphotolab.com, code TOP15. All right, on with the discussion.
And so as technology pushes forward, there's always these aha moments when a new camera feature or, option within the menus that might not be useful in most cases can help you problem solve.
Interesting. So let's talk about the whole process of making that book itself. You've done a Kickstarter to finance that. What is going to be financed with the Kickstarter, and how's that process look? Because I've never done one of those.
So it's expensive to print a book, and a lot of people don't realize exactly how expensive that is.
Especially if you want amazing paper, great quality in general. That's
We're using the best quality materials at this stage of the game. It's going to be the same footprint as my previous book, about 9 inches square. A few more pages, of course, and printed here in Canada. Anything printed outside of China is also inherently much, much more expensive.
True.
But I'll be able to be at the press facility while it's being printed and be able to sign off on everything knowing that it's going well. So there's cost involved in that, and shipping. People don't realize how expensive shipping a book from Canada to Indonesia or any of these
or
other...
to Germany. The paper is heavy, yes?
Paper is heavy. So about a third of the funds that I've collected so far have been associated just to logistics. And, it's funny. The first time I had done a book, I realized right from the beginning that no publisher would have published it because it was too niche and obscure. And I went on exhaustive, detailed rants about snowflake physics that any publisher would just say, absolutely no. This is going to be a 70-page soft cover pocketbook that's going to cost us 25 cents a copy to produce. So I get to take the risk, and I know that I've sort of developed an audience. And if that audience was interested in having this book produced, I had to hit a minimum threshold of around $30,000 in order to print about 1,000 copies. That would, I'd still have to pay into that myself. I'd probably be at around $45,000 in terms of total investment, but at least I knew at that point there wouldn't be as much of a risk.
That's Canadian dollars.
That's Canadian dollars, yeah. We hit the initial funding goal after a day and a half.
That is crazy. That is
of
so
a 45-day
crazy.
campaign, and I was just stunned because you and I both do this, Chris. We give away all of our knowledge for free in the forms of podcasts and posts online and all of that. And then when you ask people to pay for it in the form of a workshop or a book, people are more than happy to offer you money to learn from you in a different format. And this has been true so far of the book. And I've just been... I want to offer, I'm sure some people that listen to your podcast have already pledged for it. And I want to say sincere thank you so much for supporting at this point. And basically, it allows me to pour more money into the project so that I can print more copies of the book. And then my real profit comes from selling those, having already hit the break-even point. So that's the best case scenario for a Kickstarter campaign.
So the overfunding, will that also result in a different quality, different paper?
Yeah, I've done some research into the highest quality papers. There's ISO ratings, not in terms of sensor sensitivity, but in terms of what it actually stands for, is International Standards Organization. ISO ratings for paper brightness, and about as bright as you can get for paper is 96 on that scale. And so we'll be using 96 brightness paper.
Awesome.
I couldn't even find anything better than that. So it's like the best you could possibly get. And I'm debating whether or not to do 80-pound or 100-pound paper based on just how much heavier it's going to make the book for shipping.
It's kind of
purposes.
the shipping, yeah. So one thing I'm personally interested in, because I've also been through the process of making books, even though most of them I did with a publisher who just took a lot of work that I dreaded. So it was a good combination. Less control, of course, then. But I would like to just briefly touch on the writing process, because you have these two different areas in the book. The one is, let's say three different things. First of all, you need to find a good structure for the whole thing. And that for me always takes almost longer than the actual writing to make sure it really has a good flow. But then the second thing is the actual writing of the book. Which is a lot of sitting down and getting your thoughts into something that, that works for the readers. And the third is then the photos. And I guess you will not just take photos that you've already taken. You will also produce new material for the book. So
which I've been doing, yeah.
Which of those are kind of your favorites? Where's which are the most difficult?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the most difficult part is establishing flow. In fact, I'll start writing the preface of the book without having any page layouts, which I already have done. Of course, it'll be revised as the book is completed, but the initial design, the flow, will probably change 5 or 6 times. Once or twice while things are being built, and then another 1 or 2 times once everything has been written, and I just have to shuffle stuff around, rewrite things, and then reread the entire thing to make sure that stuff that I mentioned is in the right place. And that's the hardest part. The most fun element is building up a shot list of some images that I haven't taken, but I still need to, just to cover off some of the niche areas or to illustrate mistakes and to dig through my archive of images that I haven't looked at for a long time to find examples of problems that you will encounter. Because one of the things that I miss when I post on social media, I'm showing my best work.
Yeah, that's usually not the pictures you want people to see, the ones that went wrong.
Well, you don't want to see them in isolation. You don't want to see the mistakes
True.
just standing there on their own. But if you can depict those mistakes and those problems, and then offer multiple solutions as to how people can overcome that particular roadblock, and what each of those solutions affords as an end result, it's kind of a choose your own adventure sort of style then at that point, where you get to illustrate problem, solution, and result that you'll find in some online blogs, and I've written some articles on petapixel and f-stoppers and things like that might illustrate it. But in book form, you can go into all of the details and lay it out in any which way that you want with complete freedom.
Do you have like someone else on board, an editor or someone who's kind of an independent pair of eyes who keeps you on the rails, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I've got a number of people in different disciplines that will help me in terms of when I'm describing physics or biology of certain things, how I can explain how fluorescence works. Well, I mean, I think I know how it works, but I don't have a PhD in photonics, right? So I want to make sure that I have people that are more educated than I am to double check everything and evaluate it to make sure that the information is accurate. And of course, general grammar and spell checking.
Sure,
I can do that well enough myself, but you always miss your own mistakes.
Oh, proofreading at least 5 times by 5 different people, and you still find stuff when the print is done.
Yeah, there was 3 typos in my first book, and
that's very good.
That was very good, but they still haunt me. I can tell you, I can rattle off the exact pages that they're on. But I wrote that book in 3 weeks, and I just put blinders on. I did the outside world was
this book, the macro book.
No, my Sky Crystals
Sky
book, my
Crystals,
Snowflake book. So it was written in 3 weeks, and
That is crazy.
And then, of course, the polish afterwards was probably about another week and a half, and sending it off to different review bodies to make sure that the information was accurate. But I think this book will probably take me closer to 2 months to put everything together the way I would feel most comfortable.
Yeah, the 3 weeks is mind-boggling. I couldn't do that. I need much more time for that.
That's 12 hours a day every single day.
Okay,
My wife
wow.
had gone on vacation, and she went back home to Bulgaria, where she's originally from, to visit family and friends, while I stayed home alone, almost no lights on in the house except for right in front of the computer. That is where you eat and sleep, and then the book was created from that. Hopefully, I'm not as rigid a schedule this time.
I can do 3 to 4 hours a day, and then that's it. And then I'm empty for the day. I need to recharge for the next day. Oh, I envy you for that. That is awesome. So as I said, the book is only a few more days, or the Kickstarter is only a few more days. So I highly suggest I back this thing, and I highly suggest anyone else to do that, because I know that good things come from you. And this one,
and there's no secrets held back. And I want people to realize that if they've ever read a post of mine on social media, there is like a full written page of text describing every bit of the technique that I can fit into there before I hit that too long didn't read threshold that the internet is known for. But I don't have such a threshold like that when I can write a book and put that together. So if you are at all interested in this, Chris, I'm sure you're going to put a link to it in your show notes.
Definitely.
But you can also find a big banner on my own website at doncom.ca, donkom.ca.
All right, everyone, check it out, and I can't wait for it to be done. What's the date? When do you think it will be in print?
So I'm hoping that, based on current schedules, that end of October it is at the printer being produced, and then it's in my hands in middle of November. At which point I feverishly package and ship the books out for a Christmas delivery to everybody around the world.
All right, so let's all keep our fingers crossed, and good luck with the whole process. Thanks for coming on the show, and put all those links in the show notes.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me on again, Chris. We'll have to go down more rabbit holes again next time.
I'd love to. All right, there we go. Thanks again, Don, for coming on the show. If you want to get in on Don's book on macro photography, you've got to be quick. At the release of this episode, the campaign is almost over. There's just like 3 more days. So yeah, the link and everything is in the show notes. And that was it for today. Yep, that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. Thanks again, everyone, for being around. Thanks again, Don, for coming on the show. Tomorrow, I will, nothing to do with photography, I'll head out to Rotterdam in the Netherlands to spend some time listening to live jazz. I guess it's one of Europe's biggest jazz festivals, if not the biggest one. So if you happen to be at North Sea Jazz, maybe we'll bump into each other. And of course, as usual, those of you who actively support this show, you guys deserve to be part of it. So here we are with the list of wonderful people over on Patreon. I'm stalling because I can't find the list. Here it is. The patrons are Jeremy Kervin, Jeffrey Block, Alex Krozo, Bernhard Goldbach, Daniel Hertrich, Doug Gabbard, Ken Davidson, Marco Binder, Matt Armstead, Peter Morrow, Scott Wurzel, Tom Stewart, Aaron Pinasov, Stu Silberman, Alan Bruce Horn, Andrew B., Anthony, Bartek Bosky, Chadley Cluck, Chandra, Christopher Greenhill, Dave Smith, David Recht, Francesco Scaglioni, Greg Anastasi, Holger Krupp, James Trimble, Jim Caldwell, John Donahue, Josh Hopko, Just Me AMR, Ken Berrien, Kyle Nishioka, Marvin Aaron, Michael Grunert, Peter M. Spradling, Rob Duba, Robert Goschko, Ryan Gilio, Sina Fahad, Steven Sander, Thomas Nielsen, Trevor Palmer, and Woody. Wow, this time this went really well. So again, thank you so much. And anyone else, if you guys want to be on this list, hey, you'll make your name on the show. Consider joining this group of awesome people. You can do that at tfttf.com/Patreon. Thank you so much. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, sound partner Hans-Peter Gagorut Publishing, and Slack challenges by Reed Pixie, Matt Rustintar Armstead, Slack invitations by Chief Invitations Officer CIO Rusty Russ. Yeah, go pay that man a visit. Get on the Slack, get in touch with others, and the link to get on the Slack is in the show notes. And if you can't be bothered to go to the show notes, it's at tfttf.com/yslack, WHYSLACK. My name is Chris Marquardt. You'll find me on social media at Chris MARQUARDT. Go out and take amazing photos, share them with the world. Of course, be nice to each other, and happy shooting.